The sound was sharp, louder than it should have been. A stack of papers slapped the oak table in front of me. Daniel's voice cut through the kitchen air. "This roof isn't free, Mom. Start paying, or pack your bags." For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. My own son, my boy with freckles on his cheeks when he was 12, was staring at me now with eyes that looked like stone. My fork slipped from my hand. It hit the plate with a metallic clang that echoed through the room, too loud for such a small object. The light above us flickered yellow, catching every wrinkle on my trembling hands. I tried to steady them on the edge of the table, but the paper he had thrown seemed to pulse like a living thing. The words blurred. Utilities. Rent, due by the 5th. My chest tightened, as if someone had cinched a belt around it. I opened my mouth, but no sound came. Only the dry rasp of my breath. Daniel leaned back, folding his arms. His jaw was tight, his shoulders squared as if he were talking to a tenant. Not his mother. The kitchen smelled faintly of burnt toast from breakfast, but suddenly, it felt like the air was filled with smoke. My throat burned. "Daniel, this is my house," I whispered, more to myself than to him. He didn't flinch. His silence was heavier than any shout. I reached for the stack of papers. My fingers brushed the edge, and the corner sliced a tiny cut into my skin. A bright bead of blood welled up. It stung, but not as much as his words. My eyes caught the reflection in the dark kitchen window. An old woman hunched over, holding onto a table as if it were the last railing on a sinking ship. And in that instant, a truth stabbed me deeper than the paper cut. Inside the very house I had built, I was no longer a mother. I was a lodger. My name is Margaret Wilson. I am 78 years old, a retired nurse. And this is how my world cracked open. The green safe sits in the corner of my bedroom, its paint chipped at the edges, the metal cool against my fingers whenever I touch it. I bought it in 1984, back when my late husband and I still believed we were building something solid. Now, every time I open it, I smell iron and mothballs, and memories pour out like dust. I remember my first night shift as a nurse. The year was 1979. I worked 12 hours straight, stumbling home as the sun came up. My shoes reeked of antiseptic, and my bones ached. But when Daniel, only 3 years old, came running down the hallway shouting, "Mommy," all the exhaustion evaporated. That was the first of thousands of nights. I counted once. Over 40 years, I worked nearly 10,000 night shifts. Each one meant I traded sleep for survival, traded the rhythm of my body for the rhythm of bills and rent. By 1992, I had sent Daniel to a private high school. The tuition was $450 a month, a figure that gnawed at me each time I signed the check. I still see my handwriting shaky from fatigue across those slips. In 2001, he totaled his car. Insurance wouldn't cover it. I pulled 9,200 from my savings and told him, "Don't worry, son, just drive safe next time." He kissed my cheek, smelling faintly of gasoline and cologne. I thought that gratitude would last. It didn't. The green safe became my silent witness. Every month, I would slide envelopes into it. Pay stubs, utility receipts, Daniel's school reports. Over time, the stacks grew thick, leaning like tired shoulders. By my own rough count, I poured over $170,000 into his life. Money that could have fixed the roof sooner, replaced my broken hip earlier, bought me a trip I never took. Instead, it all went to him. I remember December 2010. Snow piled high against the porch. The power bill that month was $85. I folded the wet paper carefully, tucking it into a plastic sleeve so it wouldn't smear. My fingers were numb, but not from the cold, from the constant counting. Can I stretch this check another week? Can I buy Daniel that new jacket he wants? I told myself. It's worth it. A good mother sacrifices. Once, when Daniel was 12, He crawled into my lap after a school concert. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Mom, you're my hero." My uniform still smelled of disinfectant and bleach. I pressed my face into his hair and believed him. That night, I placed a $20 bill into his backpack for a field trip, and I thought, this is love, traded in currency and tired hands. Dia Malsi. But love traded like that doesn't always grow interest. Sometimes it just drains. Even back then, small cracks showed. I remember one evening in 2005 when I slid a wad of bills across the table for his rent. Daniel didn't say thank you. He just frowned at the smell of detergent on my scrubs. Olivia, then only his girlfriend, wrinkled her nose and muttered, "Why don't you ever buy yourself something nice, Margaret?" I laughed it off, but her eyes weren't kind. Looking back, I wonder, was I naive? Did I mistake obedience for love, money for closeness? Sometimes the questions come like sharp needles. Will. Would Daniel have still hugged me if I hadn't handed him cash? ACD. Did my sacrifices buy his comfort, or just buy his silence? Way. Else was I building a son's future, or was I simply funding a stranger? SC. The green safe knows the answers, but it stays locked, mute. There were nights I'd sit at the kitchen table, counting coins while the clock ticked past midnight. My hands smelled of bleach, my back screamed. Yet when Daniel called, "Mom, I need a little help until next paycheck," I always found a way. I'd sigh, fetch the key, and unlock that green safe. Each time, I told myself, this will be the last. Each time, it wasn't. And maybe, I should have seen it coming. The way Olivia's eyes lingered on the safe when she visited. The way Daniel once joked, "You're like my personal bank, Mom," and then quickly laughed as if it were nothing. But I stored those words away like receipts, hidden and ignored. I didn't want to believe they meant what they sounded like. Now, in the dim light of my bedroom, the safe looms like a coffin of choices. Every bill, every transfer, every dollar I surrendered lies there. I touch the cold handle, and I feel the weight of 4 decades pressing down. And a thought slices through me. I am not a storage vault. I was the beam that held this family upright. The cursor blinked on my laptop screen. Steady, merciless. Next to it, a red button glowed. Cancel transfer. I had clicked into my online banking, the way I had done every month for 12 years. Usually, my hands moved without thought type. The numbers, press confirm, watch the money slip out of me. But tonight, my finger hovered in the air, trembling. The room was quiet, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I could hear my own pulse in my ears, like a drum that refused to stop. I whispered to the screen, as if the laptop could answer me. If I press it, do I lose my son? If I don't, do I lose myself? PLC. My throat tightened. Questions poured out, jagged and raw. C. How much longer can I bleed for a child who only takes number, Kulaji, what's left of me if I keep paying? AMEA. A mother, or just a machine dressed in old skin? THC1. When did love turn into invoices? Each question landed heavy, like stones thrown into a well with no bottom. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The plaster above me was cracked, a faint water stain spreading like a bruise. The house needed repairs, money I never seemed to have. I remembered the number on the medical bill pinned to my fridge, 38,400 for my husband's treatment before he died. I had paid it, somehow. Alone. If I kept transferring money to Daniel, what would be left for me? My health was fragile, my savings thin. The price of not changing wasn't just dollars. It was dignity, time, and breath. I turned to the green safe in the corner. Its paint was peeling, the handle cold and stubborn. Slowly, I stood, knees aching, and crossed the room. My hand closed around the key I always kept in a bowl by the bed. I bent down, slid the key into the lock. The mechanism clicked, low and final, like a throat clearing. Inside lay years of receipts, letters, and sacrifices, silent witnesses to my exhaustion. I stared at them, then shut the door and locked it tight. This time, I didn't put the key back in the bowl. I tied it to a faded blue ribbon, looped it around my neck, and let it rest against my chest. The metal was cool, almost icy, but I felt stronger with its weight pressing into my skin. I walked back to the laptop. My finger hovered again, but this time it did not tremble. I thought, if I cancel, Daniel may rage. He may call me selfish, ungrateful, even cruel. BOPSC. BOPC. But if I didn't cancel, I would keep shrinking until there was nothing left but an empty husk who paid bills on command. I inhaled, slow and steady, and clicked. The red button dimmed. The page refreshed. Transfer canceled. For a moment, silence filled the room, heavy but clean. My shoulders shook, but not from fear. Something sharper, purer. Relief, laced with terror. I whispered aloud, to no one but myself. Margaret, if you don't stop now, you'll disappear. The words startled me. They sounded firm, unlike the wavering tones I'd used all these years. I closed the laptop. The faint snap of its lid echoed like a gavel in a courtroom, final and undeniable. I pressed my palm against the key hanging on my chest. Its edges bit into my skin, anchoring me. I realized something then. I had always imagined survival as endless giving, endless bleeding. But survival, real survival, sometimes meant saying no. That night, the house was still the same. Walls cracked, roof tired, fridge humming. But I was not the same. I sat in the dim light, hands steady at last, and said to the dark, tonight, I traded fear for dignity. The living room had never felt so small. The curtains were drawn against the afternoon sun, but thin stripes of light cut across the carpet like bars. My teacup rattled on its saucer as I tried to set it down without spilling. On the coffee table lay a thick folder. Yellow-tabbed, official, and ugly. Its presence filled the room more than either of the people sitting across from me. Daniel leaned back on the sofa, ankle crossed over knee, fingers drumming against the folder. Olivia perched beside him, her smile faint, her eyes sharp. The clock ticked above the mantel, each second louder than the last. Even the air seemed contaminated, heavy with something sour. Daniel broke the silence. Sign here. It's efficient. He nudged the folder toward me. The paper slid an inch, whispering across the wood. I kept my hands on my lap. My voice was steady when I answered. Efficient for you. Destructive for me. His jaw tightened. Olivia tilted her head, her tone sugar-wrapped in steel. Don't be dramatic, Margaret. We're trying to help. Think of it as streamlining your life. I looked at her. Drama is when a mother has to beg permission to touch her own money. Daniel sighed, leaning forward. His hand opened the folder with a practiced flick. Mom, this is for your protection. A power of attorney ensures everything runs smoothly. No mistakes, no confusion. I could hear the veneer crack in his voice. I answered with a question. Protection from what? From myself? Or from you? His eyes flashed, but Olivia spoke first. From accidents. From forgetting. From embarrassing situations. I felt heat rise in my chest. I may forget the grocery list, Olivia. I do not forget who I am. He tried again, softer this time. Mom, we just want what's best for you. You've always cared for us. Let us return the favor. I studied his face, searching for the boy who once called me his hero. Instead, I saw a man rehearsing lines. If this is your idea of a favor, I said, then I want none of it. The teacup rattled again as I pushed it further away. The room tightened. Daniel tapped the signature line with his pen. One stroke of your name, and everything becomes simpler. My hands curled around the arms of my chair. Simpler for you. Not for me. Then came the break. The net hakum of the scene. Olivia leaned in, her voice cutting through the air. If you refuse, we'll have to take legal action. The court will listen when we say, you're no longer capable. The words landed like a slap. My breath caught. For a moment, the room swam. The clock ticked on, indifferent. I steadied myself, both palms flat on the chair's wood. My pulse thundered, but my voice emerged clear. So that's it. Your love has turned into threats. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, but Olivia didn't flinch. Something hardened inside me then. My hands trembled, but my eyes locked onto theirs with a fire I hadn't felt in years. My breath was heavy, but each word came sharp as glass. I am not a crying wallet. I am the voice of my own life. The silence that followed was thicker than any argument. Daniel snapped the folder shut, the sound like a door slamming. He stood, muttering, "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Olivia rose with him, her perfume lingering where kindness should have been. "We'll let the court decide then." The front door opened, then closed with a thud that echoed down the hall. I stayed in my chair. My hands still shook, but in my chest something had shifted. Not calm, not yet, but a flame. A stubborn, steady flame that told me I was still here, still mine. The folder remained on the table, unopened now, its weight no longer crushing but pathetic. I pressed my fingers to the key hanging from the ribbon around my neck. Its edges bit into my skin, reminding me I was not erased. The living room exhaled around me. The clock ticked on, and though the silence was heavy, I could feel a new sound beneath it. My own resolve, loud and alive. The envelope was heavier than paper should be. It arrived on a Tuesday, April 15, 8:07 a.m., wedged crookedly in my mailbox like a mouth set to sneer. Summons and complaint. My hands shook as I slit the top with a butter knife. The pages slid out with a hiss. The legal words marching down in tight black lines, accusing me of something I had never imagined hearing out loud. Incompetent to manage my financial affairs. Temporary guardianship requested in favor of Daniel Wilson. The kitchen chair scraped too loudly when I sat. The refrigerator hummed as if pretending not to see me drown. I pressed my thumb to the page and left a crescent of heat on the cool paper. Outside, two neighbors paused mid-dog walk. They didn't look over, but their voices carried. "Did you hear? Maybe she's losing her mind." The dog's leashes tugged forward. The gossip stayed behind, like smoke that wouldn't clear. I folded the complaint and slid it back into the envelope. The cut on my finger from weeks ago had healed to a thin white seam. I ran my thumb across it and thought, I keep mending on the outside, while the inside keeps tearing. At 9:14 a.m., my phone lit up with a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. When I listened, a crisp female voice. Daniel's attorney, she said, laid out words like knives, hearing date, supporting affidavits, concerns about my cognition. "This is in your best interest," she concluded. That phrase, your best interest, always sounds like a door closing from the outside. I called Helen Park at 9:31 a.m. She answered on the second ring. "Helen, it's Margaret. I saw the filing come through," she said. "I'm on it. Breathe." "I am breathing," I said, and realized I wasn't. I forced air in, slow, like learning to walk again after a fall. "They have affidavits. We'll counter with facts," she said. "Dates, logs, video. The truth has a long spine." I touched the key at my throat. The ribbon felt rough and strong. By noon, the rumors had matured into certainty. At the pharmacy, the clerk who had always chatted about her cat wouldn't meet my eyes. "How are you today, Mrs. Bohr?" "Wilson?" she asked the counter. "Not me." "I'm fine," I lied, feeling the space around me thicken. At the register, a man I barely knew, Mr. Hanley, 3 houses down said to the clerk in a stage whisper, "It's a shame when it gets to that age. Families have to step in." I could have turned and said, "I still balance my checkbook to the cent. I fixed my own leaky faucet with a YouTube video last month at 11:52 p.m. Instead, I picked up my bag and walked home through a street that suddenly felt narrowed by invisible fences. That afternoon, 2003 p.m., Helen sat at my kitchen table with her laptop open. The green safe blinked from the corner like a patient witness. "Let's anchor the record," she said, fingers poised. "We don't drown in abstractions. We build a raft of specifics." We began. April 6/21/47. Call log. Daniel asking if I had completed the monthly transfer. My notes told him I'm reviewing budget. April 8/08/12. Doorbell camera. Daniel arriving with Olivia, holding a manila folder. He rings twice, then lets himself in with a key he wasn't supposed to have anymore. See April 8/08/2019. Audio from the kitchen, phone on the counter, accidentally recording. Olivia says, "We just need the signature. If she hesitates, tell her the bank requires it." CH April 9th, 10,004. Pharmacy receipt in my name. Correct dosage notes in my handwriting. April 10th, 16,033. Bank statement download. Automatic transfer. Cancelled. DH2. April 11/18. 26. Voicemail from Daniel. Mom, this is spiraling because you're making it hard. Just sign what Olivia brings, okay? It's simpler. Alan typed, as if knitting a net loop over loop, knot over knot. They filed affidavits? I asked. 2, she said without looking up. A neighbor claims you paid the same bill twice. A clerk says you seemed confused. Standard scaffolding for guardianship petitions. I did pay the water bill twice, I admitted. On purpose. To advance the next month. Helen looked up then, finally. We'll show that. We'll show everything. At 4,041 p.m., Daniel's voice arrived via text wrongly gentle, as if he wore politeness like borrowed clothes. "Mom, please don't make this adversarial. We're trying to protect you. If you sign the durable power of attorney, we can withdraw the petition. It's what any loving son would do." Loving. The word thudded like a dull hammer. He'd attached a PDF named POA Final, PDF. The signature line glared at me like a hungry mouth. I put the phone face down. The green safe seemed to watch me from its corner. I watched back. By 6:10 p.m., the neighborhood had thinned of noise. Then my front steps creaked. Ruth Collins' cardigan, gray bob, cheeks pink from the wind, appeared at the door with a warm pie balanced like treasure. "Blueberry," she said. "Stolen recipe from my sister. Don't tell her." I smiled for the first time all day. Ruth's smile answered, softening the room. "You're not alone, Maggie," she said, patting my arm. "I've seen the way they talk to you. Not all whispers are truths." She didn't stay long. That was Ruth's gift help that didn't suffocate. When she left, the house felt larger by one measure of courage. I sliced a tiny wedge of pie. The blueberries bled across the plate like a minor dawn. Sweetness can be a kind of spine. The next morning, we met witnesses of a different kind. At 10,002 a.m., Mr. Alvarez, the locksmith, sat at the table. He smelled faintly of copper and rain. "Yes, I changed the locks on March 28, he said, reading from his invoice. Mrs. Wilson asked for a single key under her sole control. She was clear, steady, and firm. He slid the invoice across. Date, time, signature. My signature. The letters were neat, not shaky. At 11,015 a.m., Dr. Ina Marsh, the psychologist Helen recommended, ran through a cognitive screen while I sipped lukewarm tea. She asked me to subtract by sevens, draw intersecting pentagons, recall 3 objects after a few minutes. My pencil scratched the paper fast and sure. You're sharper than half my residents at the clinic, she smiled. Don't tell them I said that. Your secret is safe, I said. And the green safe seemed to approve. At 12:03 p.m., we printed the doorbell footage stills. In the 08/2012 image, Daniel's eyes were hard, his hand too practiced with the folder. In the 08/10/9 audio transcript, Olivia's line, "We just need the signature," sat there without makeup, stubborn and true. Concrete beats conjecture, Helen said. We put it in a binder, tabbed, chronological. We let the court see the spine of your days. But afternoon brought more rot. 32:07 p.m. Naver Ms. Renshaw posted on the community board. Elder care is hard, but sometimes you must take the keys for their own safety. No names, but everyone knew. A modest rain of comments followed. Nodding emojis, prayers, hands, advice for compassionate control. At the grocery, a cashier I'd watched grow from braces to bold lipstick scanned my items without meeting my eyes. My bag of apples rolled off the counter. No one chased them. I did, one by one, feeling ridiculous and 90. That night, lying awake, I pictured truth as a small lantern in a windy field. How many hands would try to snuff it out? How many would cup around it? The next day brought a surprise I didn't expect. 11:40 a.m. The pharmacy clerk, Kiana, knocked on my door during her break, eyes anxious. Mrs. Wilson, I think I said something wrong to someone who asked about you. I thought I was being polite. You were, I said gently. Polite isn't always kind. But you can help me now. She nodded, fierce suddenly. I remember dates. I'm good with dates. She wrote a note. April 9:10:04 a.m. Margaret reviewed dosage instructions, asked appropriate questions, paid with exact change. She signed it and added her employee number. A small ledger entry in the Book of Truth. Crisis breathes in waves. C. Cheng, at 2015 p.m. Helen forwarded an email. Opposing counsel planned to submit an expert statement suggesting early cognitive decline based on a single interaction with me at the hardware store where I had asked twice whether a wrench set came in metric. Twice, because the clerk's music was loud. The expert was not a doctor. He was a cousin's friend with a blog, Jian. At 5:02 p.m., Ruth and I sat on my porch steps, knees under a scratchy blanket. We watched teenagers pedal by in wobbling pairs, their laughter cutting clean across the evening. Ruth hummed a hymn I recognized from a funeral years ago, but somehow it sounded like a victory song. You don't have to be fearless, Ruth said. You just have to be stubborn. I can do stubborn, I said. I know, she said, and leaned her shoulder into mine. Night folded the house gently. I made tea and set it beside the binder Helen had built. Tabs in careful colors. Call logs, video, recipes, medical, locksmith, statements. A spine, as promised. Still, worry sat across from me like an uninvited guest. What if Daniel found a way to twist even this? What if the court looked at my years of giving and saw only a woman addicted to sacrifice, unfit for refusal? What if love, misunderstood, made me look like a liar? I looked up and caught my reflection in the window, the key on the blue ribbon resting against my collarbone. My face was older than yesterday, but my eyes were steadier. I spoke to the room, to the safe, to my own pulse. The pain isn't only betrayal, I said softly. It's the gaze of suspicion. The words settled. They didn't fix the air, but they named it. Naming is a kind of map. The kettle clicked off. I poured water over the tea bag and watched the color bloom like bruises fading. On the table lay the summons, the gossip, the counterproof, the pie tin with crumbs. All of it true. All of it mine. I cradled the mug and let the steam soften my face. Then another thought rose, uninvited but fierce. If they can convince a court that I'm not myself, who will I be when the judge looks up? And the question hung there, bright and terrible, lighting the path to the next day. I wasn't looking for it. I was only searching for a roll of tape in the drawer by the hallway desk. The kind of ordinary errand that should have lasted 10 seconds. But my fingers touched something stiff, thicker than a stray receipt. An envelope, cream-colored, unmarked. I pulled it out. The paper was cool, unnaturally so, as if it had been waiting in the shadows. The flap wasn't sealed. A sliver of folded pages slid free. And then I saw it. My name, written in black ink across a line that should have been blank, neat, but not mine. Margaret Wilson. The M was too sharp, the G too stiff. My heart lurched. The room tilted. The clock on the wall ticked once, loud and cruel. My pulse raced in uneven beats. I sat down hard on the edge of the chair, the paper trembling between my hands. It was a power of attorney. My signature scrawled across the bottom, granting Daniel full control over my finances, my property, my future. I pressed my fingertip to the ink. It bled faintly, as if mocking me. The air in the room grew metallic, the smell of old dust rising from the drawer. My hands shook, but my eyes sharpened. I whispered to myself, "So my son can forge my name, but he cannot forge my heart." The words echoed in the small space, louder than they should have. Memories ricocheted. Daniel laughing when he was 12, clapping when I handed him money for a school trip. Olivia's hand pressing a folder across the coffee table last week, her smile too rehearsed. I thought of the neighbors whispering, the rumors, the complaint letter from the court. All of it fit now. The false narrative wasn't just words. They had proof, or what looked like proof. I closed my eyes. For a heartbeat, despair rose like a wave, ready to pull me under. Maybe this is how it ends. Maybe they win. And I become a ghost in my own house. Then, I opened my eyes. The wave broke. The paper crinkled as I gripped it tighter. The ink might be theirs, but the will was mine. If they think silence will bury me, they are wrong. I slid the forged document back into the envelope, but not into the drawer. I tucked it under my arm, pressed against my ribs where I could feel its weight. My hands still shook, but inside, something steadied. I stood, walked to the mirror in the hallway. My reflection met me head on. Hair silvered, cheeks lined, eyes burning. "Margaret," I said out loud, "you've carried the weight of exhaustion, of bills, of grief. But you will not carry this." The house was silent, except for the tick of the clock. Even the silence seemed to wait for my answer. I tapped the key hanging from the ribbon around my neck, feeling its sharp edges against my chest. And I knew what I had to do. Tomorrow, I would take this paper to Helen, my lawyer. I would show her the forgery, the proof of betrayal. I would not hide, not anymore. The battle was no longer private. They wanted to drag me into the open. Fine. I would step forward, not as prey, but as witness. I took a deep breath. The air still smelled of dust and metal, but beneath it I caught something else. A hint of freedom, faint like the first breeze before dawn. That night I didn't sleep much. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw the false Margaret Wilson glaring at me from the page. But instead of fear, I felt fire. I whispered into the darkness, "This time, I will not let silence kill me." The days that followed turned my house into an armory, not of guns or blades, but of paper, ink, and memory. Helen sat at my dining table, her laptop open, sleeves rolled, glasses sliding down her nose. Stacks of receipts lined the wood like small soldiers waiting for orders. The green safe, usually silent in the corner, had been opened wide. Its belly emptied, secrets laid bare. Every folder, every log, every faded bill became a weapon. We labeled each piece with dates and notes. April 6, 21,047. M.C.T. Daniels call, recorded on my phone, asking about the transfer. April 8, 08 DOT1. MET. Doorbell camera footage. Daniel and Olivia entering, folder in hand. Each April 8, 08, 19A. MDT-SD. Audio clip, Olivia whispering, "We just need the signature." She SA April 9, 10,004. A. M. Nauseous 2. Pharmacy receipt. Dosage notes in my handwriting. March 28, 1123. A. M. Ms. G. Locksmith invoice. 1 key. Under sole possession of Margaret Wilson. Each document slid into a plastic sleeve, snapping shut with a sound that felt like armor plates locking into place. Helen typed fast, the keys clicking like sparring swords. "Evidence is truth and sequence," she said. "Will show the spine of your life, straight, strong, unbroken." I nodded, though my hands trembled as I placed another receipt into her pile. "Do you think it's enough?" She paused, looked at me over her glasses. "Enough isn't the question. The question is, will you speak it as clearly as you live it?" The words sank deep. At night, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, the cool light buzzing above. The first time I tried to rehearse, my voice cracked. I whispered, "My name is Margaret Wilson. I am 78 years old. I know what I earn, what I spend, and what I choose." Cigar-basses. But halfway through, my throat closed. My reflection looked back. Small, hunched, frightened. I pressed my palms to the sink until the porcelain bit into my skin. The second night, I tried again. I read aloud the dates, the numbers, the sequence. My voice shook but did not break. By the third night, I looked my reflection in the eye. I canceled the transfer on April 10th at 16:33. I remember the red button. I remembered the sound of the laptop lid snapping shut. That sound was mine. I straightened my shoulders. For once, the woman in the mirror did not look like a victim. She looked like a witness. Ruth stopped by with tea and ginger cookies. She sat on the edge of the sofa, crumbs on her lap. "Practice with me," she said. So I did. I stumbled over words, my sentences looping back, but Ruth just smiled and asked again. Each time, my answers grew shorter, cleaner. When I faltered, she squeezed my hand. "You don't need to be perfect," she whispered. "You just need to be real." One afternoon, Helen brought in her assistant, a young woman named Claire, sharp-eyed and calm. Claire pretended to be opposing counsel, firing questions fast. "Mrs. Wilson, isn't it true you paid your water bill twice?" "Yes," I answered, steady now. "Once for the month due, once for the month ahead. Because I plan, not because I forget." "Isn't it possible you're confused about dates?" "No. April 6 was the call. April 8 was the intrusion. April 10 was the cancellation. My life has numbers carved into it. I do not misplace them." Helen smiled faintly. "Plain. Proud. Exactly." Late at night, alone again, I remembered all the times I had stayed silent. The dinners when I swallowed my words. The visits when I wrote checks instead of boundaries. Silence had been my chain. I touched the key around my neck. It pressed against my skin like a reminder. This time is different. Gathering the evidence felt like sharpening blades. Each receipt a dagger. Each video clip a shield. Each testimony a spear. For years, I had bled currency. Now, I forged it into weapons. The house smelled of paper and ink, the rustle of documents replacing the hush of surrender. On the final night before the hearing, I faced the mirror again. My heart pounded, but my voice did not tremble. "My name is Margaret Wilson. I am 78. I am not incompetent. I am not confused. I know my life because I have lived every inch of it." I canceled the transfer. I locked the safe. I chose myself. The woman in the mirror nodded back, steady, unafraid. Helen arrived the next morning, arms full of binders, eyes bright with determination. She set the stack on the table, then placed her hand on mine. "Tell it plain," she said softly. "Tell it proud." I gripped the binder, the key at my neck pressing firm. I whispered to myself as we walked out the door, I am not practicing to defeat my son. I am practicing so I do not lose myself. The courtroom smelled faintly of furniture polish and old paper. Wood everywhere. The benches, the rail, the judge's desk, raised like a small stage. The light was cold fluorescent, steady, almost clinical, flattening colors into grays and blues. A bailiff in a navy blazer stood like a statue by the door. To my left, a wall clock ticked with the patient arrogance of time. I sat at counsel's table, hands folded, the key on its blue ribbon warm against my skin. Helen arranged binders in front of us, tabs in neat colors, call logs, video, recipes, medical, locksmith, statements. Across the aisle, Daniel and Olivia whispered to their attorney. Daniel's suit looked too tight across the shoulders. He didn't glance at me. Or if he did, he glanced through me. The clerk called the case, voice echoing against the wood. In the matter of guardianship of Margaret Wilson, the gavel touched wood. One clean tap. The room inhaled and held its breath. Opposing counsel rose first. She wore a severe black suit and the smile of someone who has practiced saying, "For your own good," until it sounds like kindness. Your Honor, we are here today because Margaret Wilson, age 78, has shown a pattern of cognitive decline and financial confusion. This petition is not punitive. It is protective. Protective. The words slid across the floor like oil. She talked about late payments, not late advanced. Duplicate bills on purpose. A supposed episode at a hardware store. Music too loud, asked twice, not confusion, and the strain on Daniel, the loving son forced to intervene for my safety. Helen leaned toward me. Let her stack her blocks, she whispered. We're going to show how hollow they are. Helen stood. Calm. The kind of calm that turns noise into furniture. This is a petition about control, not care, she said. Mrs. Wilson is older, yes. But older is not incompetent. Today, we will show the spine of her days. Numbers, logs, footage, receipts. We will show a forged signature. We will show intent. She set a binder on the lectern. The tabs glinted like little flags. Truth in sequence, she said, and the phrase felt like a bridge between us. The judge nodded once, eyes steady, pen poised. Opposing counsel called their first witness, Ms. Renshaw, a neighbor with a gentle sweater and a voice that tried to be soothing. I saw Margaret pay the water bill twice at the mailbox, she said. I was concerned. Helen rose. Twice in the same month? Yes. Which month? December. And you watched both payments? Well, she told me she'd paid twice. So you saw one payment and heard a statement. Yes. And did you know Mrs. Wilson often pays 1 month ahead so she doesn't miss a due date? No. The judge wrote something. Ms. Renshaw's sweater suddenly looked too warm for the room. Second, opposing counsel presented Mr. Freshen, Duff, a hardware clerk and self-styled aging expert, which turned out to mean he once moderated a community forum about elder issues. She asked me twice if the wrench set came in metric, he said. Which it does, he added, as if the truth were a product he had designed. Helen's cross was gentle, almost kind. Was music playing? Yes. Loud? A bit. Were you multitasking at the register? Sometimes. Do you have medical training? No. Are you licensed to assess cognition? No. So your testimony is, a customer asked you to repeat yourself in a loud store. I suppose. The judge's pen paused in midair. Opposing counsel then moved to the heart of their petition. The safety net of a durable power of attorney, signed by me. The copy came out in a transparent sleeve, as if it might contaminate the room if it touched air. I watched the fake M2 Sharp sit there like a small, smug lie. Helen called Dr. Ina Marsh. Crisp gray suit, steady eyes. the scent of peppermint gum. I evaluated Mrs. Wilson last week. Minicog, MOCA, clinical interview, she said, translating the acronyms without condescension. She is attentive, oriented, and capable of describing complex sequences, dates, amounts, decisions, without prompting. She's not only competent, she's meticulous. Opposing counsel tried to poke. Doctor, she is 78. So is my favorite chess partner, Dr. Wriggleishes. Marsh said. Age is not a diagnosis, but forgetfulness. Normal forgetting is not impairment. Panic at a loud register is not impairment. Paying a bill ahead is not impairment. A small breath moved through the gallery, like the room nodding. Next, Mr. Alvarez, the locksmith. Plaid shirt, calloused hands, invoice in a plastic sleeve. March 28, he said. Mrs. Wilson requested a single key system, her sole possession. She was clear. No duplicate keys without her consent. Helen held up the invoice, his signature, the date and time stamped by a printer that didn't believe in ambiguity. Would a person confused about her safety or control make that request? No, he said, without flourish. She knew exactly what she wanted. Opposing counsel tried to turn it. Sometimes confused people become paranoid. Helen didn't flinch. Or sometimes competent people become careful, she said, and let the line hang in the air, solid as wood. Finally, Ruth Collins. Cardigan again. But today, a neat blouse underneath, hair smoothed like a promise. I've had tea with Maggie twice a week for years, she said. She makes lists, what she spends, who she calls, what she fixes. I've watched her pay exact amounts, match receipts to statements. She is stubborn, yes. Stubborn is not confusion. Opposing counsel smiled a thin smile. You care about her. Yes, Ruth said. That's why I won't lie for her, or against her. Ruth looked at me as she stepped down. Her eyes were bright. Mine burned and cooled at the same time. When Daniel took the stand, my stomach clenched. He swore the oath with a voice I had taught to say please and thank you. Now it wrapped itself around safety and concern, like a vine around a fence. Mom's been making mistakes, he said. It scares me. The guardianship is temporary. I'll give control back when it's stable. Helen stood, binder closed. She didn't need it. You texted your mother on April 11 at 6:26 p.m., she said, stating you would withdraw the petition if she signed a power of attorney in your favor. Is that correct? Daniel shifted. Yes, but. So the guardianship is leverage. No, it's options. Options for whom? He looked at Olivia. For everyone. Everyone is a convenient word when you mean yourself. Helen's voice stayed even. On April 8, at 8009 a.m., your wife said, in your kitchen, we just need the signature. Did you hear that? I don't recall. We'll play it, Helen said. She clicked her laptop. The speaker was small, but the words were large. Olivia's whisper filled the court, intimate as poison. We just need the signature. If she hesitates, tell her the bank requires it. Silence after. A silence that listened to itself. Opposing counsel objected. Tone. Context. Something about partial recordings. The judge overruled. The words are clear, he said. Continue. Helen did. Mr. Wilson, is this your mother's signature? She held up the forged power of attorney. He swallowed. It looks like it. It is not. Helen slid a transparent overlay across a real signature from my driver's license. Note the tail on the G'ge, the slope of the M. Forensic review pending, but even a layperson can see the mismatch. Daniel blinked. Olivia's mouth flattened into a line so thin it looked like it might snap. We moved to the artifacts of my daily life. Helen laid them out like stepping stones. The doorbell footage. Daniel and Olivia at 08:12 a.m., folder in hand, key used. My face surprised at A8, 12,023. The kitchen audio. The rustle of paper. The lemon sugar tint of Olivia's voice. The call log. April 6, 21, 47. Daniel asking about the transfer. My note, in blue pen. Reviewing budget. The bank record. April 10th, 16,033. A red notation that might as well be a flare. Automatic transfer. Cancelled. The pharmacy receipt. April 9, 10,004. Dosage questions lined up like pins in a row. Each page slipped into evidence with a soft plastic sigh. I could almost hear the binder growing a spine. Opposing counsel tried to build a new frame. Mrs. Wilson is defensive, maybe paranoid. Canceling the transfer created strain. Helen didn't look at me. She wanted me to hear the next line, as if I had said it. Boundaries are not paranoia, she said. They are competence in action. Between witnesses, I couldn't stop seeing Daniel at 4 years old, forehead damp from a fever, his breath small and fast. At 8, holding a soccer trophy with a chipped corner like a tooth. At 12, head bowed into my shoulder. Mom, you're my hero. Words that had once paid my rent and meaning. Now he sat straight-backed, eyes marble hard, his mouth thinning when evidence landed. He avoided my gaze the way a person avoids a mirror. Pain isn't linear. It moves like light through water bends, shivers, finds you even when you face away. I held the key at my throat and let it hurt. I didn't push it away. I didn't drown in it either. Helen touched my forearm. Your turn, she said. I walked to the witness stand and placed my palm on the Bible, the wood warm from the hands before mine. The bailiff instructed. I swore to tell the truth. Truth didn't need the oath, but I gave it company. Helen's questions were simple. State your name. Margaret Wilson. Your age. 78. Do you know why you're here? Because someone mistook my age for absence. A flicker at the judge's mouth, not quite a smile. Describe April 10th, 1633. I canceled the automatic transfer. The button was red. My laptop made a small snap when I closed it. I felt afraid. And then I felt clean. Why did you change the locks on March 28? Because my house is mine. Why wear the key? Because my body needed to remember what my mind had decided. Opposing counsel approached with paper confidence. Mrs. Wilson, do you ever forget where you put things? Yes, I said, and I remember where I put the things that matter. Do you ever become overwhelmed by bills? By grief, yes. By bills, no. I've tabbed them. She frowned. Why not accept help? Help offers a hand, I said. This petition is a hand in my pocket. The judge's pen rested again. Helen nodded to me, the signal we had rehearsed. Now. I turned from the lawyers to the judge. My hands were steady on the rail. I could feel the grain of the wood under my palms, the present tense of it. I spoke, not loud, but full. Your Honor, I am old. I am not a myth about age. I have given this family a roof, dinners, and 1,000 nights awake while others slept. I do not ask this court to make my son love me. I ask to keep what my hands have earned. I know the dates, because I lived them. I know the numbers, because I counted them when my back hurt and my eyes burned. I canceled the transfer, because love without dignity is not love. It's an invoice. I will help when my heart says yes, not when someone says you must. I have a mind, a will, and a name. They belong to me. My dignity does not live on a monthly payment. It lives here. I touched my chest. The key knocked softly against my breastbone like a witness agreeing. The room listened. Even the clock seemed to hush for a measure. The judge set his pen down. He regarded the pile of exhibits, the faces before him, the space where words had just been. The petition for guardianship is denied, he said. The court finds Mrs. Seventies Wilson competent to manage her affairs. The proffered power of attorney is rejected pending forensic review. On its face, It is inconsistent with known exemplars. The court admonishes all parties that guardianship is a last resort, not a tool for leverage. The gavel struck wood. Once, twice, final. Sound rushed back into the room. The scrape of a chair, a muffled cough, someone's breath catching like a tear about to form. I didn't cry. Not then. My eyes stung and cleared, like windows after a sudden rain. Helen squeezed my hand under the table. "Breathe," she whispered, though this time I already was. We stood, the court dismissed. The bailiff opened the door. Cool corridor air slid in, smelling of hallway dust and faint soap. Daniel rose without looking at me. Olivia murmured something I didn't hear. They left with their lawyer, their footsteps moving at the speed of borrowed confidence. Ruth appeared at my side like a warm lamp switching on. "You stood straight," she said. I saw it. "Thank you," I said, and heard my own voice, low, steady, mine. Dr. Marsh shook my hand briefly. Mr. Alvarez lifted a palm in a quiet wave. Kiana from the pharmacy, who had slipped into the back row, dabbed her eyes and gave me a thumbs up that looked like it was practicing being brave. We stepped into the corridor. Sunlight fell through a high window and broke into a bright square on the floor. I placed my foot in it like a child testing water. The warmth climbed up my leg, small but certain. Outside, the day was clear. The air had that bare, clean smell that follows a storm. It didn't make everything right, but it made right now possible. Helen stood beside me on the courthouse steps, the binders cradled like trophies and tools. "You did that," she said. "We did," I answered. "But yes, I did." Ruth pressed a tissue into my hand. "Keep the key," she said. "Not just the metal one." I laughed then, softly, the surprise of it shaking a piece of something loose inside me. The laugh turned into a breath that reached all the way down. I looked back at the courthouse doors, dark wood shining, the handles polished by years of hands that had come to plead, to defend, to say enough. "Enough," I whispered, to the doors, to the sky, to the woman I had finally remembered to be. We walked to the curb. Cars passed, indifferent as clouds. A city bus sighed to a stop. Someone ran for it, laughed when they made it. Life kept doing what it does, moving, not asking permission. I touched the key at my throat. It clicked against the small metal clasp, a tiny sound, private as prayer. Freedom isn't given, it's something we keep. The house was silent that night. After the gavel, after the crowd, after the cold corridors of the courthouse, I came home to walls that held their breath. No footsteps, no whispers, no folders slapped onto tables. Just the hush of a house learning to feel like mine again. I placed my purse on the chair and slid the binder of evidence onto the dining table. The plastic sleeves shone under the yellow lamp pages of receipts, logs, and signatures that had saved me. I touched them once, then reached for a smaller thing. From a drawer, I pulled out a photograph. Daniel, 12 years old, hair falling over his forehead, eyes too wide for his face. He was clutching a soccer ball, smiling as if the world could never sour. I laid that photo on top of the binder. Boy over evidence, memory over verdict. My chest tightened. The courtroom had declared me competent, but no gavel could repair the tear of a sun-turned stranger. I sat at the table, staring at both stacks, paper and picture. The fridge hummed. A branch scraped the window. The air was too still. I whispered into it. I won. But how do you keep being a mother when your heart is already torn? The words hung there, unanswered. The relief was real. The judge had denied the petition, rejected the forgery, affirmed my right to my own name. The key at my throat no longer felt like a defense. It felt like proof. For the first time in months, no one could legally take what I had built. And yet, the silence pressed harder than the courtroom walls. Victory does not silence grief. It only makes space for it to echo louder. I made tea, the ritual automatic, Kettle on, water hiss, steam curl. The cup warmed my hands, but my insides stayed cold. I thought of Daniel's face on the stand, his eyes sliding past mine, his mouth forming words about safety and protection. He had looked almost convincing, almost. But I knew the boy in the photo would not have needed to convince anyone. That boy had loved me without paperwork. I sipped the tea. It scalded my tongue, sharp and bitter. The clock struck 11. Outside, the street lamp glowed a weary yellow. I walked through the rooms, touching furniture as if to prove it still belonged to me. The sofa sagged where I used to fall asleep after shifts. The safe in the corner stood closed, its metal skin cool under my palm. For once, I did not feel compelled to open it. I had nothing left to prove to it. In the bedroom, I set the photograph of Daniel on my nightstand. I whispered to it like a prayer. I don't know if I'll ever get you back. I don't know if I want to. The words stung, but they were true. I lay down, staring at the ceiling. Sleep did not come. Instead, images replayed, the judge's voice, Ruth's steady testimony, Helen's hand on mine, Olivia's thin smile. And through it all, a single refrain: it is over. It is over. It is over. It is over. But endings are never that neat. I rose before dawn. The air was cool, the house still cloaked in night. I opened the front door and stepped onto the porch. The world outside was quiet, dew on the grass, sky pale with the first hint of light. I wrapped my robe tighter and breathed in. The air smelled faintly of soil and wet leaves. For the first time in months, I felt the ground beneath my feet, not as a battlefield, but as earth. Inside, I returned to the mirror where I had practiced my testimony. My reflection waited. Same lines, same silver hair, but the eyes had shifted. Not bright with victory, not drowned in grief, something steadier. I spoke to the mirror, softly but firm. I am still Margaret Wilson. I am still here. The woman in the glass nodded back. Later, I returned to the dining table. I lifted the photo of Daniel from the binder and slid it into a small wooden frame. Then I placed the binder itself, evidence, records, all of it, into the green safe. The metal door clanged shut, final but not oppressive. On top of the safe, I set the framed photo. Child over fortress. Memory over defense. Pain over proof, but also hope over ending. I poured myself another cup of tea. This time, I added honey. The sweetness lingered longer than the bitterness. Looking out the window, I thought, victories don't fix hearts. They mark where the bleeding stops. Healing is slower, quieter, and often lonelier. But it begins. Always, it begins. That night, I lay down again. The photo caught the lamplight, Daniel's boyish grin hovering above me like a ghost. My eyes filled, but the tears didn't fall hard. They slid slow, quiet, as if they understood they were allowed. I whispered one last truth to the room. Every victory leaves a scar. The first morning in my new apartment, the air smelled of salt. I carried a cup of coffee onto the balcony, bare feet on cool wood. The bay stretched out like a patient blue mirror. The mug was light in my hand, light in a way the phone had never been, back in the beginning, when its vibration felt like a weight tied to my chest. I raised the cup and breathed in. Not messages, not demands, only steam. I had sold the house, the one that had become a courtroom of its own, walls holding whispers, floors remembering footsteps that barged instead of asked. Signing the deed transfer felt like unclenching a fist I hadn't realized was still tight. People asked me if it hurt, letting it go. Strangely, it didn't. It felt like a body shedding fever. The house had been mine once, but for too long it had belonged to suspicion and shadows. Now it would belong to someone else, and I belonged to myself. My apartment is small, but it breathes. White walls that catch sunlight instead of trapping it. A balcony with a chair that creaks in welcome. not in warning. I unpacked slowly, only what I needed. A kettle, a stack of sketchbooks, a few frames. The photograph of Daniel at 12. I kept that. I placed it on a narrow shelf, beside a jar of seashells Ruth had brought me from her last trip. The photo no longer felt like evidence or accusation. It was simply memory. A boy with a ball, a smile unburdened by signatures and lawyers. It hurt, but the hurt was gentler now, less a knife than a scar that no longer bleeds. Days have shape again. In the mornings, I sketch. At first, my hands shook, the pencil sliding hesitant, but the page doesn't judge. Lines gather anyway. Crooked flowers, awkward faces, waves that look more like hills. Then, slowly, my hands learned to steady. The sketches grew bolder, messy in a way that looked alive. In the afternoons, I plant pots on the balcony, soil under my nails, tiny sprouts that push upward even when the wind knocks them sideways. I whisper to them sometimes. They don't answer, but they keep growing. That is answer enough. At night, I walk along the bay. The path glimmers under streetlights. Strangers nod hello, and I nod back. Sometimes I stop at a small cafe, order chamomile tea, and sit alone without feeling lonely. Motifs return, but different. The green safe came with me, yes. I almost left it, but in the end I loaded it into the moving truck, its weight no heavier than memory. Now it sits in the corner of my new bedroom. Empty. The lock clicks clean, not secretive. I don't fill it with bills or forged papers. I keep only one thing inside. A folded piece of blank paper, waiting. Not for evidence, not for defense. For whatever I choose to place there, someday. A painting, a letter, a pressed flower. My safe has stopped being a prison. It is simply space. The key still hangs from the blue ribbon around my neck. But now, when it rests against my chest, it doesn't burn. It hums. It is not a shield anymore. It is an ornament of survival. I think back often to the trial, to the weight of the judge's words. People assume that verdicts are the end. They're not. They're beginnings wrapped in wooden echoes. The law gave me back my name, but only I could give myself back my breath. That's what I practice now, every day. The art of breathing without permission. Sometimes Ruth visits, carrying pies or laughter, usually both. Sometimes Helen calls, not as a lawyer, but as a friend, asking how the sketches are going. I send her a picture of a crooked sunflower, and she texts back, strong spine, just like you. I don't hear from Daniel. The silence is sharp, but it is clean. Silence used to be a cage. Now it is a boundary. I let it stand. I write small notes to myself. Not diaries, not long explanations. Just fragments, scrawled in pencil, tucked into books or taped to the fridge. Poetry. Poetry is heavy. Coffee is light. It's E. You are not waiting for calls. You are answering yourself. Off LC. Offi e scar is a seam. Seams hold things together. Number 4. In you are 18-9, vocal well file chio. A lob dimpra, terated, me, buys. As if a future self keeps reaching back to hold my hand. One evening, I lit a candle on the balcony. The flame leaned toward the wind, but did not go out. I watched it flicker and thought, that is what I am. Not untouched, not unbent, but still burning. I sipped tea, set the mug down. The porcelain was warm, but my hands were steady enough not to tremble. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like someone's mother, someone's bank, someone's proof of competency. I just felt like myself. The phone still sits on my table, of course. It rings sometimes. Ruth, Helen, the cafe confirming a class. But it no longer feels like a summons or a leash. When it vibrates, I don't dread it. Sometimes I even let it ring, and the silence that follows feels like music. The contrast is sharp in my mind. Once, the phone weighed like a stone in my palm. Now, the coffee cup feels like a feather. That is the circle closed. I don't know what tomorrow will bring. I don't need to. I have paints drying in jars, seedlings reaching for light, a balcony that opens to air and horizon. That is enough. I no longer live to be accepted. I live to breathe deep. From now on, I live not to be accepted, but to breathe. Thank you. If you're still here, it means you walked with me through every night, every doubt, every courtroom gavel, every silence heavy as stone. That matters more than I can say. At 78, I never thought I would tell my story out loud, much less have someone listening on the other end. So thank you, truly, for walking this road with me. Margaret Wilson, 78. Now, I have just one question for you. If one day, the person you love most turns you into a tool, a wallet, a servant, a shadow of yourself, what will you do? Will you stay quiet and keep paying the cost? Or will you draw the line and guard your dignity? If my story touched you, I invite you to respond. Leave a comment. I want to hear your thoughts, your own stories, your choices. Share this with someone who might be standing where I once stood, afraid to say no. Follow along, because each week I will tell another true journey. Not perfect lives, but real ones, where love and pain wrestle, and where boundaries are not weakness, but survival. Every comment, every share, every voice makes the silence less heavy for someone out there. You may never know whose courage you helped spark, but believe me, it matters. I don't write this for pity. I don't write this for judgment. I write because silence nearly swallowed me once, and I promised myself it would not again. Tonight, I sit by my window, coffee light in my hand, the sea air clean on my face. I am not anyone's property. I am not anyone's proof. I am simply myself. And that is enough. I am not a breathing purse. I am the keeper of the key to my own freedom.